Hi there, I'm Todd Brozart, licensed clinical social worker, therapist, and the creator behind Mental Events. I'm so glad you stopped by. The aim of this video that we're about to go through is to set up what is commonly called the ACT matrix. Consider this video an overview of the matrix and a resource to help you begin practicing observing how functional your choices actually work for you. If you're wondering what ACT stands for, you're not alone. It stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. ACT is essentially a model of health and a behavioral therapy that focuses on promoting the acceptance of internal experiences and taking committed actions that are consistent with what matters to you. So when working within the ACT matrix system, our intention here will be to use language that is non-judgmental. As observers, we're going to be setting aside the metric of things being good versus bad or right versus wrong. So within the matrix, we're giving ourselves permission to set perfection aside and mindfully become available to and aware of what's working and what's not working. The way we tend to relate to our thoughts now, on automatic pilot mode, we become so close to our thoughts that it's easy to think that we are what our minds say. And so we struggle to see the difference between being under the influence of a thought, so looking from, and our ability to notice a thought in the mind, so looking at. So from the vantage point of looking from our thoughts, we routinely fall back into the story of self. This is just who I am. This is just the way it is, we sometimes say. I think you could agree there's considerable risk in becoming defined by unhelpful and destructive self-statements and evaluations. The good news is we can learn to pay attention to our thoughts and feelings, memories and urges and sensations as they show up, and non-judgmentally reflect on how useful our behavioral responses are working in relation to what's showing up on inside of us. So enough intro, let's dive in and get in with the ACT matrix. So notice here with the matrix, I have a vertical line. At the top, I've noted observable and senses. And at the bottom of the vertical line, I've noted mind experiences and inside. So differentiate between the two. I'm going to use an apple to demonstrate this. So for starters, I'm going to have an observable and sensory experience with this apple. I can see the apple. I can also smell the apple. I can also listen to the apple. I can also feel the apple. And lastly, I can taste the apple. And now I'm going to put the apple away so it's away from my observable and sensory experience. And now I'm going to have a mental experience with the apple in my mind. I'm recalling seeing the apple in the mind. I'm recalling the smell of the apple and listening to it. I'm feeling the apple in the mind. And lastly, I can taste the apple in my mind. Now, from a place of observation, which is an important skill of the matrix, I'm able to notice that I'm able to have a sensory experience with the apple, and I'm able to notice that I'm having a mind experience about the apple. So keep this difference in mind as we move forward. You're able to have observable and sensory experiences in your life, as well as have mind experiences totally within the mind about those experiences, and yet they're not the same thing. And so the ACT matrix system is directional. It's toward and away. A for away, T for toward. You might be wondering, what's an away move? What does that even mean? So think of an away move as something you do behaviorally that moves you away from uncomfortable or unwanted internal experiences. So a few examples might be, an away move might be repeatedly using substances to move away from unpleasant thoughts or worries. An away move might be withholding how you feel for fear that you'll be judged or considered a burden. Toward moves, on the other hand, these are actions, the things you do behaviorally that move you in the direction of what matters to you, even though there might be temporary discomfort experienced at the time. So a toward move can be anything you do to engage your life in a meaningful way that honors people, places, and things that actually matter to you. So a few examples, a toward move, it might be engaging in therapy, even though the thought of talking about your struggles stirs up worry and judgment. Completely understood. A toward move might be saying, I love you, even though expressing that openly hadn't been readily practiced in your life. So think of a toward and away move almost like they're two sides of the same coin. Different sides, but they make up the same coin. In essence, when we move away from something, we choose to move towards something else. And when we move towards something, we choose to move away from something else. So when we choose to move away from a bad relationship, we choose to move toward healing, because that's what matters. right? And so when we choose to move toward healing, we're also choosing to move away from staying in a bad relationship. Hopefully that makes sense. So in context, it's important to note that both toward moves and away moves can be workable and useful things when they're appropriate. That's the purpose of this matrix. And so what we'll be looking for and trying to study throughout is whether there's a functional balance with the choices that you're making. So while using this matrix system, we can take stock of what's working, what's not working, and learn to move away from a threat when it's necessary, and learn to move toward things that matter to us, even though there might be some temporary discomfort. Having that kind of response flexibility in your catalog of decision making will be absolutely important. Okay, let's keep going. All right, now digging in a little further, you on the other side of the screen observing this video, I want you to bring to mind something from your life that you've been struggling with. Maybe that's an unresolved or distressing situation. Maybe that's the feeling of fear, or unworthiness, or shame. Maybe you're worried about something coming up. Whatever comes up for you, just try to bring it into full awareness. And as you have this mind-body experience on the inside, what feelings show up for you? Where does that experience show up physically? And what thoughts or judgments also seem to be present in mind? Give yourself some time to be present with whatever shows up for you. This is going to be important moving forward. Maybe you feel anger or sadness, irritated, fear, loneliness, even shame. So now if you were to observe what you tend to do behaviorally in response to that stuff that shows up on the inside of you, if we were able to take a look at what you do on the outside, externally, what patterns of actions would we observe you doing on the outside? That's the point. Our well-rehearsed actions to avoid or escape what we don't like feeling and experiencing are designed to move us away from whatever the uncomfortable experience is. But, there's a big but here, as we will observe, many of these attempts to control feeling uncomfortable in the moment don't actually work very well in the long run and come to have their own set of consequences. Now what I want to do is introduce you to some questions, and for each section, go ahead and jot down a few bullet points for each box that we go through. So get out that pen, get out that paper. And so let's start on the bottom right-hand side of the matrix, where we can see the T for towards. So first, I want you to consider who and what are important to you in your life. This is vital. This is so important. Pun intended. It can be anything, right? People, places, things, ideas, concepts that are important to you. So think, what's valuable to me? What brings a sense of vitality and meaning and purpose to my life? When have I felt alive inside? And if you haven't felt this way in a while, bring to mind when you have felt that way in the past. So, again, who and what are important to me? That's what I want you to indicate in this box. Preferably, I'd like you to jot down as many ideas, memories, concepts as you can in this box. And after you get a solid list, take some time to notice how you feel inside as you look over your list. Really consider each thing you noted as well. Try to picture yourself in relation to whatever you noted. Remember, you get to choose what you write in this box. You can write anything down. I really recommend pausing here if need be. Okay, let's move over to the bottom left-hand side of the matrix. The questions to consider here: what is showing up on the inside of you? What's showing up on the inside of me? What shows up on the inside of me that gets in the way of connecting with the important stuff, the who and the what matter that we just went through? So what we're doing is we're cultivating emotional awareness in this quadrant, as well as learning how to be with and have what's showing up in the present. So whatever is distressing you that we indicated earlier, whatever is coming to mind, I want you to take a moment to list all the things that are showing up on inside of you that's getting in the way of who and what are important to you in any way at all. And so now consider what actually stops you from moving toward who and what matter. A depressed mood, feeling unmotivated, not feeling acknowledged or accepted, fear. Maybe you're even feeling ashamed because you felt you should have had more control with something, or maybe you felt disconnected and alone. A common example that I hear are fear-based and anger-based statements, self-doubt and self-criticisms. We're really good, I think you could probably agree, at criticizing ourselves. So again, take your time with noting the stuff that shows up on the inside and how that interferes with how you want to be with yourself and how you want to be with the world. So just notice how this bottom stuff down here, all of these are mind-body experiences that are all happening on the inside of us, just like I was doing with that apple. Nobody else will ever know about all of this stuff unless we communicate about it. So now that you've had a list of what shows up on the inside of what you do down here, let's go up to the top left-hand side of the matrix. So the things that we do up here to solve our problems can at times end up giving us more of the stuff that we don't want on the inside down here. And it just so happens that the things that we do down here often move us away from the people, places, and things that we actually care about. The more we live out this loop, the more solidified it becomes. And the more we practice this loop, even though we don't want it, the more we wire it into our programming, it can be very unhelpful. So up here, this box is asking you to consider when you're tangled up on the inside by all of these things down here. When you're really under their influence, what do you end up doing behaviorally? What reactions and behaviors are observable by yourself and others? So up here, I'm encouraging you to jot down a few things that you do on the outside when you're under the influence of these internal things down here. So what do you tend to do when difficult thoughts, feelings, sensations, and memories show up? And how do you try to escape, control, or avoid the things you don't like feeling? So I want you to consider these questions. So what tend to be my automatic reactions when relating to the internal stuff I don't like? And where are these responses likely to lead? So I'm going to go through a few examples with you. So let's say fear is showing up on the downside part down here. So fear might lead to avoiding or stopping an important activity like going to work or school, which forms a loop. It leads to more fear. So another example, feeling bored or alone and having the thought that I don't want to be a burden might lead to hours of scrolling on social media and binge watching shows on a streaming service, which then leads to additional boredom and discontent, another loop. Feeling unmotivated may lead to avoiding exercise of any kind or avoiding committing to your craft. It might also look like binge drinking or overuse of substances, which may lead to a depressed mood, which forms another stuck loop. Feeling anger and sadness after a breakup may lead to you jumping right back onto a dating service the day afterwards. But that within itself has its own consequences. One side note that might lead to trying not to think about it, right? Think about all the times that we try not to think about something. This forms its own little stuck loop down here, all in the mind. And that happens quite often. So consider as a result of your responses, you may get a small hit of feeling better. I don't doubt that. But the cost of the choices you make over a long period of time likely forms a stuck loop that reinforces unpleasant thoughts and feelings and really bad habits, unhelpful responses. So again, what we're trying to identify are behavioral loops or stuck loops in your life so that we can analyze the function of your behavior together. Not noticing these connections back and forth, someone might go a long time creating layers and layers of their stuckness. There may be an urge, and I get this, to only add the good things you do or the positive coping skills you've engaged in. Feel free to add those, but we're not just looking at how you cope positively with these things down here. Remember, this isn't about being right or doing good. We're just here to observe what comes up, what has come up, and how you tend to respond to that stuff on the inside, and then get a look at whether or not it's actually working or not. So if an obvious loop is forming or has formed in your life, we can work further to understand it and the functionality behind it. Okay, time for our last box. So up here, our aim is to step outside of the struggle or the stuckness that stems from the survival instincts and survival responses. Over here, we have our toward moves. These actions are representative of what moves us toward what matters to us. So I'm going to normalize this for you right now. If you don't know what matters to you, maybe you feel stuck with this, or you don't have an idea of what a move in the direction of what matters to you would look like, that's okay. That's what we're here to figure out. So an important question to ask ourselves is, right now, what are some things that you could do or I could do that would move me or you toward the people, places, and things that actually matter? So what could you do that would matter to you, that would move you toward what matters? So despite what's being felt down here in the bottom left-hand side, it's time to consider engaging in committed actions toward value-based choices. And being that you are the one who does get to decide what you do, and you are the one that gets to decide what things mean, what could you do behaviorally that is values-facing to break out of the well-worn stuck loops toward a different future? Sometimes it's helpful to consider what behaviors you're already doing as well, or have done in the past that did work out for you. It's also helpful to identify future behaviors and committed actions that you haven't given a fair shot with, right? So apologizing, admitting you're wrong, asking for help, maybe just changing your schedule 1%, whatever it is. So if after a while you find that you're still struggling to identify something, we can just put a large question mark in the box. Not to avoid it, but to continue considering valuable options. And maybe this is an indicator that we can spend more time together doing values work. So one suggestion to gain some traction with your values is to consider the people in your life that have inspired you. This has helped me time and time again. So what is it about these people that you admired about them? Bring someone to mind. Chances are there's some important values, some important gems in there about that person and how they conducted their life. So I just want to say, sometimes I hear people say that it feels like they've wandered their way into their current mess and don't know how they got there, or for that matter, how to get out. And I completely get that. That's part of the human condition. That's the insidiousness of stuck loops. We often don't see them forming, or for that matter, how long we've been living them out. What I can say is that the wandering that got you to this point isn't likely to get you out of that stuck loop pattern. You may find that temporary relief, but eventually you'll be right back where you started. So what's required and what we can work on is observing your choices and being flexible with your choices while you commit to the process of change. It won't be easy, but it will be meaningful. It will be rewarding. And so one last thing. Remember to return to your observation point as you continue to dive into this exercise. The observation point, or me point, where I'm actually at right now, is very intentional. This is where you get to observe the different aspects of your life, observing how particular ways of behaving are actually functioning for you. So notice how you can be involved and engage your life in so many different ways, while also observing your life. So take your time with this matrix. Again, this is just an overview. Study your patterns. Notice what comes up while you do the work, and then we can work on it together. So thanks for watching this video all the way to the very end. Leave a comment below on how the matrix helped. And don't forget that not all those thoughts you experience in between your ears are facts. They're mental events. Here one moment and gone the next.